Right, so that I think needs to be rounded a little bit further. I'm thinking one tooth that way might be. Let's try swapping this around the other way up. And try it there. That's in place. Will it cock? What a sausage. If I got that round, oh yeah, what an idiot, got that round the wrong way. Try it there. No, didn't cock. Let's swap that 180 degrees. No, it's not. Oh, what's happening here? No wonder I'm getting nowhere. The all-important piece that actually connects to it was not present. Fall off, did it? No, it didn't. It won't go far enough to cock, which means that is too far around. Let's try one tooth off. That won't cock either. I have to consult the picture and get this done correctly. All working correctly. What was the secret? The secret was simple. When I'd taken my pictures earlier, it was already after I had displaced that coupling here, so that it wasn't in the correct position anyway. So it gave me it meant that working from memory, I was putting it back correctly working from memory, but I was putting it back correctly to the wrong spot. Anyway, it's all sorted out. So I've got to put my flash contact wire on here, and then I can fit the shutter back onto the front, and it'll work reliably. But otherwise, it's all looking very good. The action is nice and smooth. It's nowhere near as rough as it was when I started out. So I'm on the home straight with the shutter. Once I've got the shutter complete, I'll put it in the camera body, check that it works nicely with the camera body, and then the camera body will probably be tomorrow's job. Well, after a bit of toing and froing, I was able to get my flash sync wire soldered on and threaded through, and I think that'll be fine. I can't say I'm hell of a pleased about the positioning of it, and that I'm just going to try to pull up the heat shrink a bit on that cable. I think that'll be fine now. I've got to get that heat shrink wrapped around that cable a little bit tighter. The connection comes right up to that point. I do not want it shorting against the body at any stage. But while that's all happening, I've got my screws that hold all this in place. So I thought I might just as well put them in. Now these 4 screws are all the same length, are they? Yes, they are. So I'll drop one in there and get it run up so that things don't fall out of place while I'm busy mucking around soldering up wires. And there's another one. Get that in place too. And there's number 3. That leaves us with number 4 over here by that. If I pull back the rangefinder coupling, I should be able to get to that. And I'll nip those 4 screws up tight now that I've got them installed. Because I'm reasonably confident I won't be back in there. Right, well I've just got to join up my flash connection at this point, and I should be good to go. But we do have a shutter that cocks and fires. So that's good at least. I'll just solder that wire on now. That is back in, flash wire connected up, everything good. And there was almost cause for weeping and gnashing of teeth, but it turned out that the lead on my electronic flash was faulty. And when I tried another electronic flash, this triggers it nicely. So, you can see I've got my flash wire back in here. It's insulated with some yellow heatsink in memory of the yellow spaghetti that they had on there to start off with. So this part, at least, is done. And that can go back on the camera body. Except I've got to service the camera body yet, but I may just put this on here temporarily just to see how it behaves. If I can get this all in place. Oh, I've got to take the base off. I need it. I'll loosely put this little shroud in place, which I hope can go either way up. Is that fitting down in place? It appears to be. I'm not seeing the shutter opening and closing. What have I got it set to? 500, perhaps it's too quick for me to see. No, I'm not seeing anything happening there. It's not cocking. certainly works there. Something's not coupling to something. Oh, mystery there. I'll have to find out the answer to that. That might be tomorrow's job. That's it. It's all good. What was the secret? Well, I was one tooth out on my gearing here. So it was cocking the mechanism here, but it wasn't cocking the shutter as well. Not in the stroke from the camera body anyway. However, now I know that my shutter works, the flash works. This plunger is obviously somewhat sticky. That needs to be dealt to. Tomorrow's job now. Let's have a look at this lens. I would expect that this front piece unscrews completely from the body. Certainly looks like it's going to. Yeah, and the coupling here is much like on a retina reflex lens. 3 screws holding the outer helical to the focus scale ring. This is all quite stiff. Will certainly need some cleaning up. Let's remove these 3 screws and their washers. It should allow me to lift the lens capsule out of the lens mount. There we go. There's the outer helical, the inner helical on the lens of course. Pop that, excuse me, I'll pop those pieces to one side. Let's have a look at that lens body first. The rear group's pretty dirty and it's got some sort of marks inside. I can't tell what they are. The front group, the outside surface doesn't look nice. It's been behind the UV filter, or was when it arrived. So it's anyone's guess how that came to be in that state or how cleanable it is. And here we have the mount with a coupling at the back here for the aperture. That's quite stiff. It's got moving depth of field pointers. They certainly swing in and out, but this is quite stiff in its action. And the focus action, again, that's quite stiff. So I'll have to open this up and work out what's going on. Right. It's early in the morning and I'm ready to go. So 4 screws on the back of the case. It'll be a while since I had one of these particular lens mounts apart. That's quite heavily sprung loaded. Let's lift this off. Yes, there's a big wavy spring in there. Let's pop that to one side. Flip this over and knock those screws out. What have we got here? Well, we've got our control ring and our coupling ring for the rangefinder here, which I notice is quite stiff and sticky. That will be contributing mostly to that stiffness. You can see there's quite a bit of dirt and rubbish in around the edges here, so that should all clean up quite well. Let's have a look at this piece. This coupling ring here has got a little pin on it, and that couples to, let's take that, all this is exceptionally sticky. That pin on there couples to this cam. There's a spacer ring here. I'd better get these laid out in order because otherwise it's going to be fun putting it together. This spacer, which there's a pin that locates that. We have one of our depth of field pointers, the cam, another spacer, I'll unhook that spring, this is the second of the depth of field pointers. Now I'm down to the basic lens mount. That's quite stiff in its action. There are 3 clips here which provide some tension. There's 4 actually. And I've got to remove these screws and then separate these 2 parts and clean them. Everything here is covered in a thick layer of grey grease, which I presume was graphite grease, but it's just gone sticky with age. So these 4 screws hold these clips in position. That one's a screw post that holds the return spring for the depth of field pointer, so I don't want to unscrew that unless I have to, just because it's a bugger to get a tool onto that. There's the 3 screws I'm removing. See if I can get these clips out. This one's placed awkwardly. I can't get it past that stop easily. I may not have to. Let's see if I can wriggle that out. No, it's coming. Alright, so we've got 1 clip left on that side. I think I can work off that one. Yeah, there we go. So there's the parts, all covered in dirty old grease, and I'll clean these up now with Naphtha and start reassembling things, and I expect I'll be able to get this to run much smoother. Now this plate here, I noticed that when I hold that against the light, you may see it too, see if we can get the light to play on that a bit, it's not dead flat, it's got a few ripples in there. I'm sure they weren't intentional, and that will certainly contribute to that action being quite stiff. So that's something to watch for. Look at that thick grease. Bloody awful. Right, to the cleaning. I'll get started on this. Offhand, I don't remember what date the Vitessa T was made, but I presume it was somewhere at the tail end of the 50s. So I can say that this is probably 60 years old. And from the state of this, I'd say no one's been in here in 60 years. I'll clean the inside too. That's where the front filter mount screws in at the front of the case there, so that's all, that's just dust and rubbish that's fallen in. Now this piece, our focus scale ring, this has a special problem because the numbers are virtually gone. I'm wiping this very carefully. I would say at a guess that somebody's cleaned this with an inappropriate solvent, and it has removed the painted numbers from that focus scale ring. They're still there. They're vaguely legible if you know what they're supposed to say. And of course the camera has a rangefinder built into it, so you are not too constrained by the fact that the markings are illegible. So apart from the markings being somewhat removed by whatever solvent this has been cleaned with in the past, the whole lot's also quite yellow and dirty with dried oil, so it doesn't exactly look a thing of beauty. However, that's an improvement for the moment. I've still got to deal with one more potential area of problem on that ring, and that's the groove round here that those little clips act against. Now that'll be packed with dried out grease, so I'd like to get that out. It's certainly probably was graphite grease at one stage. That's fine, and I'm just going to run around that groove with a paintbrush, a very stiff old paintbrush, just to remove the last traces of that dried grease. that looks pretty good. I think one more white around the centre there and I'll be happy with that. All these lens mount components I've got here, the actual base where it fixed to the camera, are made out of aluminium, and aluminium has a tendency to for galling. Galling's when metal is rubbing against metal, and it basically, I suppose, it creates localised welding spots basically, and the metal sticks together and rolls up, and you end up with rough surfaces where you originally had smooth surfaces. Alright, that piece will do, I think. And here's the mating part. And this is likewise pretty dirty. You've got two problems with all the old grease and oil here. The first is that it's trapped in a lot of dust over time. Dust has entered. Oil and grease tends to hold dust, so you end up with a grinding paste where you used to have a lubricant. And the oil itself, or the grease, as it loses its volatile components over time, tends to dry out, eventually sort of reduced to something like a hard dry wax, which can just glue parts together basically. There's an awful lot of dirt on this, whether it's finger grease or not I can't really say. It's something of that nature. I'm just going to go and clean this in some hot soapy water and see if I can clean up these serrated edges here. That's packed with dirt and I can't get at it with a cotton bud. But hot soapy water and a toothbrush, I may be able to clean those edges. The only paint I'm likely to lose here would be that tiny little triangle there. So if I avoid that, I'll probably be good. Back once that's clean.